informed and provide professional development for them, and also plan a little bit of the future professional things that happen at this annual state conference, and as well as the Ken Demas Leadership Academy. So we'll be pumping that out soon. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Like I said, hopefully Tuesday, tomorrow, we can get that out. And also real quick before we start, Dr. Manson is going to share a link at the end of this presentation regarding a certificate for the webinar. So if you're interested, that'll be in the chat. So just keep an eye out for that at the end. So getting into the presentation, we have our guest speaker today. We have Dr. James from the College of Brockport, and also our president of New York State AHPERD, Dr. Seymour, and they're going to be sharing their presentation about the revised overall revised plan of the guidance and assessment document. So I'll let you two take it away. I know I messed that title up, but.
Okay, thanks, Kobe. It's nice to see everybody here. I'm Dr. Alisa James. I'm a professor and associate dean at SUNY Brockport. Dr. Clancy Seymour is my person I'm tag teaming this presentation with. So I'll let Dr. Seymour introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see everyone. A lot of future professionals here and professional colleagues. Colby, nicely done. Congratulations on your tenure. I'm privileged and honored to co-present or ride the coattails of Dr. Alisa James, who spearheaded the original first edition of the curriculum assessment guidance document, and now has allowed me to ride her coattails to the second edition. So I'm very fortunate to follow in her footsteps. I've also been warned that Dr. Madden from Cortland here, my evil doppelganger, is here. So if you see me laughing, it's because he's sending me private messages or messages for everyone to see to make joke and make light of the situation. We certainly appreciate his sense of humor. But thank you for having me, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present with Dr. James.
Thanks, Clancy. Dr. Madden is on the center square. If we were playing Hollywood Squares, he's looking straight at me. So he's right in the center of my screen, so I'll keep an eye on him. So we're gonna get started. I'm gonna share my screen with you all so you can see it. Everybody see this? All right. So the title of our presentation is the revised New York State AHPERD Curriculum Assessment Guidance Document and Overview. There you see Dr. Seymour and myself, and that picture of me, I would love to say that it was recent, but it is a little older. And Dr. Seymour, he looks the same. So this is just an overview, and we hope that if you have questions, we have time at the end for questions as we move forward. So the first task that we're going to do with you is a get to know you task. We have some interactive pieces built in. So Dr. Seymour, I'm going to let you go ahead and administer the get to know you task.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. James. In the chat, I've attached this little get to know you survey. Hopefully you can see it in the chat and be able to click on it. And I can certainly rely on Rochelle and Dr. Manson and Colby and others in the chat if for some reason it's not coming through. Oh, here we go. Excellent. So we got some 96 participants, and so far we're at 2. So we're only at 2%, and hopefully, again, I was referencing our scholarly endeavors, Dr. James, Dr. Manson, Dr. Madden. We certainly want higher response rate than that at this point. We're at 3. We're moving along. Excellent. I'll share my screen in a second, and we can take a look at some of the responses. $17, that's great. We'll wait a couple more minutes and then we'll share. Okay, we're nearing 50%. That's pretty good. couple more seconds, Dr. James, and we'll
Okay.
maybe ask you to stop share for a second so I can share the results here.
All right. I'll stop the share.
Awesome. Okay, so we're still climbing. That's great. So I'm going to share the results. We're over 60% now. 60. That's fantastic. I'm going to share, and you can see here. Can everybody see my? Or maybe you can't. Let me try that again. Share, and hopefully you can see the results here. And you can see here we have a lot of colleges and universities represented here. That's fantastic. Large portion from SUNY Cortland. That's great. A few from Canisius. That's great. Obviously, proud of that as well. Oh, we got a couple cases where Canisius is listed. You can see all of the different percentages here. Where's Brockport here, Dr. James? I want to make sure that
Yeah, I don't know.
give a shout out.
I'm not seeing it. What's the big
response? So that's
35?
more than once.
30.
So you see it written in, one is saying, for example, here, Canisius College, another one's saying Canisius. So this is a written response question, I think. So that's probably why you're seeing the disparity in results.
Right. Okay.
Fantastic. Take a look at the breakdown of the types of students here. We have 45% that are graduate students, nearly 50%. That's impressive. Small fraction freshmen, and then a lot of in between. Okay, and then we have what experiences do we have with the first edition of the CNA document, and we have a good mix here. We have used in many of their content and experiences in their program. That's fantastic. So 32%. That's great. And then we have a small fraction not used at all. We have teaching activity courses at about 12%, and method classes about 30%. That's great. And then even in field experience and student teaching nearing 13%. That's fantastic. So that's good information. 71 responses. Thank you for indulging Dr. James and I. James, do you want to go back to? You want me to share my screen with the PowerPoint, or do you want to? It's whatever you want.
I'll do it.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so we're going to get into the presentation. It's good to know that a lot of people have used the first edition or at least been exposed to it. So, whoops. The purpose of this revised document is to provide developmentally appropriate content and sample assessments that will allow students to acquire the skills, knowledge, confidence, and motivation through participation in quality K-12 physical education programs. And so that purpose is not really that different from the first edition, but you're going to see as we go through it, the formatting has changed quite a bit. Oops, sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm muted.
Okay, I don't know who that was. So some background on this document. It really was created by teachers for teachers. We had a lot of teachers who worked on the first edition as well as the revised edition. This revised edition has been reviewed by teachers and directors of physical education, higher ed people, and we've taken input from these groups and incorporated them into the document. One of the big changes in the revised document is that it aligns with the new New York State physical education standards. So why did we need to have a document like this? One reason is that it does provide a focus for physical education content across the state and a common language that allows physical educators to be on the same page when talking about curriculum. So again, it's a guidance document. It's not the end all be all, but it is a document that allows us to talk about curriculum and all talk about the same types of things. One other thing that this document can do, it can really unify physical education content across the state. A lot of times you start talking with practitioners, people that are teaching, and you might go into a room and people will be talking about, even if we take physical fitness, and might be talking about a lot of different things and talking about it at different grade levels and things like that. And this document can allow people to be able to talk about what should be taught possibly with physical fitness in 6th grade or 7th grade. And it can be used in that manner. Another thing that this document does, it articulates across grade levels and will be useful in planning units and lessons. One of my biggest things about teaching physical education, I used to call it SSDY, same stuff, different year. Because a lot of times, you know, when we start teaching basketball in the 2nd grade, 2nd or 3rd grade, and we teach beef, and then we're still teaching beef as seniors in high school. And this document allows us to actually build on content from year to year so that the learning of students becomes more sophisticated and we move away from same stuff, different year. How can teachers use this document? Well, one of the big ways that teachers have used it is they can have a specific focus to their lesson plans. There are focal points, which we'll talk about, but the focal points can actually be the focus in your lesson plan. Another thing, using this document, it ensures you're teaching content that's aligned with state and national physical education standards, as well as the national physical education grade level outcomes. Another piece of this document, there are sample assessments that can be used to measure learning at specific grade levels that are part of the document. Another big way teachers use it that I talked about a little bit earlier is that teachers can use it as a tool to communicate with colleagues about content that should be taught in the curriculum. A lot of districts I've worked with have actually taken it and rewritten their curriculum, utilizing it as a guide and getting everybody on the same page. So curriculum focal points, I alluded to these a few minutes ago. In the document, there are focal points that are the focus of the different aspects of the curriculum that are the curricular pieces. And the idea of curricular focal points is every other subject, math, science, English, they have documents that have curricular focal points that are aligned with specific grade levels. And to give you an example, in the 3rd grade, everybody learns to do division. And so that's a curricular focal point. And so we wanted to do something in physical education that we would have those same type of focal points so that we can move away from the same stuff different year, and that you would know that in 3rd grade, we would try to teach this focal point. And then in 4th grade, the focal point would be a little different and more sophisticated and built on the curriculum offerings. So what are curricular focal points? Curricular focal points actually provide a grade-specific focus for a lesson that's aligned with the learning standards. However, the teacher has the freedom to design learning tasks in the manner they deem appropriate to teach the curricular focal point. So you could take a focal point, Dr. Seymour and I could take the same focal point, and we could design tasks that look very different to be able to teach that focal point. They're not intended to be exhaustive. There are other foci that you can use to teach a lesson. Again, this is a guidance document. So the revised document. The first edition was organized by curricular strands. And if some of you said that you had used it, and that was based on child's play. So that was the acronym. And so it was character, health related, fitness, individual enjoyment, life skill development, and skilled play. The new edition is organized by the new standards. So there's no more child's play. It's not organized by curriculum strands anymore. And the document has been broken down into 2 separate guides. So instead of it being one big guide, there's an elementary guide and a secondary guide. In addition, we've included some specific content and assessments that are aligned, all of it is aligned with the new physical education standards. And there's still explicit vocabulary that's connected to the content, just as it was in the first edition. The other piece that's new is we have an updated adapted services section. In the first edition, there were some adapted pieces to it, but the second edition will have a much more extensive adapted services section, adaptive services, physical education. All right, so in the document, we have curriculum tables. There's elementary and secondary curriculum tables. And each table includes the physical education anchor standard, a content strand, and a grade level outcome. So every table looks like this one. So you see this is standard 1, and standard 1 is to demonstrate competency in a variety of motor skills and movement patterns. And then you have the grade level outcome, which is sports skills and games. And this is kindergarten. And so you can see that the grade level outcome is to identify locomotor, non-locomotor, and manipulative skills. And then the focal point you have here is for locomotor skills. And it's to consistently demonstrate a recognizable form of a minimum of 4 locomotor skills while maintaining balance. And then underneath that are all the locomotor skills are listed. And then the next column, you have definitions or vocabulary that defines each of the locomotor skills. So the tables in this document are all set up the same way, and they're all aligned with the newly revised New York State physical education standards and grade level outcomes. Okay, so now we have another little quiz for you. So Dr. Seymour, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to share with you another check for understanding, and hopefully you can see it now in the chat, and we can have you take a look at those questions and a quick little review of what Dr. James covered. And remember that many of you have been already trained well with the CNA document, first edition. So some of this should be a refresher to all of you. So you should be receiving check for understanding 1, and hopefully that's where I did post it in the chat. No link? Oh, okay. Let me do it again. I'm sorry. Oh, wrong one. There's a waiting room. It went to the waiting room first. So those people will jump in. Okay. See now, let's see if it worked now. Thanks, Anthony.
Looks like
Thanks,
Anthony got
Dr.
it.
Madden as well for keeping me on my toes. Appreciate that.
How we doing, Dr. Seymour, on the results?
Responses yet, but a couple. Oh, we got one response, so it's working. That's great. These questions take a little longer to discern, so give them a couple seconds. Oh, good. We're getting some responses here. We're up to 10. That's great. Oh, wow. Shot up to 25. So we're getting there. That's great. Give you 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll get the answers and we'll go from there. That's great. We're almost 60. Okay, now that's great. So keep on going and I'm going to share my screen. We can share the results. And can everybody see the results to the survey? Give me a thumbs up on your screen if you can see it. Great. Okay. So the first question, how many standards are included in the recent release of the New York State Physical Education Learning Standards 2020? Many responses. That's great. And you can see here that the correct answer is 6. So if you recall from many of my presentations across the state since March, we've covered this, and we've gone to a 5+1 model. So yes, the new Physical Education Learning Standards 2020 include 6 physical education learning standards. And then as Dr. James mentioned, how was the content in the first edition organized? And I'm pleased to see that many of you recall that 67% recall that child's play curricular strands piece is how the first edition of the CNA document is organized. And then on top of that, drilling down another level with the CNA document, what the question was, that a curricular focal point, how would we define that? And you can see nearly 90% have got it right. Grade specific focus for a lesson that's that aligns to the standard, but it's certainly not exhaustive, allowing the autonomy of PE practitioners to apply and perhaps modify when necessary. And then what will be the biggest change in the new second edition that all of you are having a chance to sneak peek today, and that would be obviously the realignment of the organization of the document itself, and the fact that the child's play curricular strands will no longer be used to organize the content, namely the curriculum and or curricular practices and assessment practices, the exemplars, if you will, and instead the document will be organized by the standards themselves. That will be the guiding feature of the new second edition. So thanks, that's great. So now I'm going to hit stop share and continue on with the presentation. Just when you thought it was safe to swim, it's my turn. So here we go. A quick explanation for 5+1 and why it's unique review is the glue. Okay, thanks, Coach Madden. Yeah, Dr. Madden, appreciate that. So if you recall, with our standards, when we revised the New York State Physical Education Standards, we had a lot of questions to ask. Should we revise from, or should we potentially revise the 3 that were in place in 1996? Or should we think about a rewrite altogether? Or where does Shape America fit into this equation? And Shape has done a wonderful job. A similar framework that we certainly have borrowed from Shape is the idea, and we'll talk about that today, but the idea of the anchor standard, that's really New York State, but nevertheless the standard itself, and then followed by the content strand, and then drill down to the grade level outcome. And so those 5 national standards are really well done. And so when we put together a revision to the New York State Physical Education Standards, we felt that that the 5 national standards would be a good starting point for us, with some minor revisions to standard 5 with language, but then the +1 that preserves the original integrity of New York State Standard 3 from 1996, which is that informed consumerism piece. So that's why you hear me reference 5+1. So we adopted the national standards with some slight revisions, and the +1 is from the old New York State Physical Education Learning Standards, the old Standard 3 with a revise. So that's, thanks for the question, Matt, appreciate it, or Dr. Madden, excuse me. Okay, so now let's go back to the PowerPoint here. Let's see, just give me a quick sec. I'm going to pull it up over here and slideshow from current. I think we're on just physical literacy. Okay, good. So now let me go to share screen, just a sec. And here we go. So can everybody see my PowerPoint here? Give me a thumbs up. Excellent. Okay, so if you recall from your previous training with the CNA document, we talk about how the content, namely the curriculum and the assessments, are organized in the first edition by curricular strands Child's Play. In the second edition, the new organization is going to be via the standards. But the framework for both documents are the same. It first and foremost is the CNA document, first edition or second edition, is premised on the construct of physical literacy. So that's important to understand. I hope many of you are well versed in what physical literacy means, the motivation, the competence, the confidence to again achieve for a lifestyle of an individual journey to physical literacy. That's an important construct that's well represented in either edition of the CNA document, and obviously ties nicely to the standards themselves. The idea that each child can develop their own individual journey to physical literacy. So when thinking about the framework, physical literacy certainly allows us to continue to champion physical education programs K through 12 in New York State. So when taking a look at the framework for the CNA document, again, whether it's first edition or second edition, not much has changed except this middle portion right here, okay? So we have physical literacy that guides us, that grounds us, the individual journey, followed by a connection to our national standards and outcomes. And then in the old document, the second edition, this would be the curricular strands, Child's Play. Well, in the new version, our framework is that organizes the content is now the standards 1, the 5+1 again, standards 1 through 6. So again, remember standard 1 really mirrors national standard 1 psychomotor attributes. Standard 2, psychomotor and cognitive domain tactics and strategies. Standard 3 is health-related fitness and the knowledge and skills within, very much a cognitive focus with some psychomotor to go with it. And then standard 4, the personal and social responsibility, affective domain. And then standard 5, the value of being active and the importance of appreciation. That's standard 5. And then the addition of the terminology overall wellness, the understanding that physical education can lead to the well-rounded education of each child, and in particular, an advent for social emotional safety as well. And then standard 6, again, that alignment to the original New York State Standard 3, the informed consumerism piece. So that's the difference between the first edition versus the second edition. The second edition will now be aligned via these New York State physical education standards, and Child's Play will, I guess, go to pasture, if that makes sense. So that's the content. And then the second part of the document, and as Dr. James mentioned, this is a curriculum and assessment guidance document. So the curriculum is straightforward. Dr. James has depicted nicely what the curricular tables will look like. And then the second part of each document, again, it's going to be it's going to be an elementary and a secondary book. And the back half of each exemplar will be sample assessments. So what we're going to take a look at are some for all of you to take to consider. Again, these are samples that align to the specific anchor standards from New York State. They are split into grade level bands, either K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12, which again, similarly align to the standards. They're not intended to be exhaustive, and certainly can be added to, modified, adjusted, can be used for formative and summative purposes. Our future professionals in the room, what do we mean by formative and summative purposes? You can type it in the chat, you can hit your space bar and shout it out. You're physical education professionals, you are vibrant, you are excited people, shout it out. Tell us, what do we mean by formative and summative purposes? Anyone?
Assessing people either at the end or along the way.
Exactly. Well said. It was, let me see who that was. We have someone who typed it in the chat, Michelle and Claire, and that was Shannon who said that as well. Thumbs up to all of you. You win a free coffee from Dr. Madden. Well done. Okay, so excellent. So exactly right. These assessments can be used in any way to inform and guide instruction, part of the learning cycle, right? Okay, so let's take a look at standard 1. So we've talked about standard 1, the idea of competency in a variety of motor skills and movement patterns. So here's examples. Here's an underhand throw and overhand throw rubric that could be applied. So future professionals in the room, how might you use this potential sample assessment in your learning or your teaching endeavors? How might you use? Anyone?
In our unit plans or learning objectives?
Okay, and give me good job, Elizabeth. Tell me a little bit more. How exactly?
Using correct language.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
We have an answer in the chat too.
Okay. Let's see. To understand a student's skill level, exactly. We could use it as a diagnostic for sure. We talk about formative and summative purposes. Assessments can be used for a multitude of reasons, right? Diagnostic for learning, program assessments, so lots of different reasons. Awesome. Okay. Great job. All right. So let's move on to another example. Here's a 3 through 5 net wall activity. Or excuse me, rubric. Take a look at this. And how might you use this particular assessment within your learning endeavors as a PE practitioner?
Like setting the criteria for your evaluation?
Yep, obviously criteria, and you want to, anytime you're using evaluation or using assessment, you want to make sure that your students are well-versed and understand what expectations are. Fantastic, excellent. Thanks, Liz. Okay, and then here's an example of a 9 through 12 outdoor assessment that aligns to standard 1. Again, the idea of movement and motor skill. You can see that as the students become more independent, K through 12, the assessments become more sophisticated as well. So that's standard 1. And the same thing applies as we move along throughout the rest of the slideshow, examples that align to these particular anchor standards. And again, not exhaustive, but lots of different ideas that can be applied. So take a look at standard 2. Standard 2 really targets strategies and tactics. So cognitive and psychomotor attributes. So here's a K through 2 assessment that centers around movement concepts. Now take a look at the 3 through 5 assessment. Take a look at the quick explanation that goes above. Analyzing skill, students analyze the performance of a skill by a peer and provide feedback to the peer versus this K through 2. So looking at both of these, what are the differences or perhaps what are the commonalities? How might you use the K through 2? How is the K through 2 different than perhaps the 3 through 5, but yet still both meaningful? Anyone?
Can you go back to the 2?
Sure.
Yeah. The secondary one is, it involves a peer review.
Yeah, I mean, the K through 2 assessment really does rely on a teacher observation, right? Where the 3 through 5 is more geared towards potentially being a learning endeavor for the students to undertake with the evaluation criteria itself. That's the biggest difference in that example. Well done. Okay.
In addition, they also, cognitively understand what they're trying to reach their goal as. they understand the concept of learning to differentiate and to learn a skill, and then to apply that, you just send them the psychomotor, but all 3 domains.
Sure. Absolutely. Was that Matt? Matt? Gonzalez?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Well, now we have a couple comments about social skills, and you're right, that's an important piece. But remember that and this is something that we always have to remember, is that the rubric or the assessment guides the attributes, right? So in this situation, you're asking for specific psychomotor evaluation. So keep that in mind.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
The evaluation piece is important, but it's not being evaluated in this example.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, and then here's another one for standard 2. We could say this is a middle school oriented. This is borrowed from the tactical games GPA, or even some sport education assessments. And you can see this example from a middle school level. And you can see how it aligns to not only performing the skill, but the strategies and tactics that go into being successful within the game situation or simulation. Okay, so that's standard 2, some examples. So let's take a look at standard 3. And standard 3 is the knowledge and skills to achieve and maintain health enhancing levels of physical activity and fitness. So what types of assessments do you think we're going to see that align to standard 3? Given the anchor standard.
Health and, well, physical fitness, health and fitness.
Yeah, so that's one for sure. If we're looking at health enhancing levels of physical activity and fitness, we probably are going to assess physical fitness under that standard. That's certainly one way to do so, or perhaps assess physical activity and the performance of physical activity. But take a look at the language. What does that knowledge and skills mean?
Psychomotor and cognitive.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, because the psychomotor relates to health-related fitness, or for actually physical activity and fitness, we certainly have to consider that as psychomotor. But that word knowledge really implies cognitive. So if you take a look at some of the example assessments here, here's an example of some sort of written assessment at the K through 2 level that you can be possibly used. Pretty simple and straightforward. But as we get to an older age, the assessment, again, still takes the shape of being a written assessment, but it becomes a little bit more sophisticated as well. Okay, so that's standard 3. And then the last one that I'm going to cover is personal social behavior, or personal social responsibility, standard 4. So now we're connecting to the affective domain a little bit. And now we get into some examples that are teacher oriented or teacher observation oriented. But take a look, I think it was Matt who mentioned about that social piece. And something that I always remind my students in teacher prep is that it's not the activity that guides the assessment, it's the actual rubric or the criteria that guides the actual assessment. So in this example, take a look at the different attributes that are being evaluated. Now we know, okay, this is geared towards social growth, social learning, versus a psychomotor assessment that has 2 students working together. It's still a psychomotor assessment because they're working together to assess skill performance, or perhaps even the assessment of the skill performance could be considered cognitive because each student is looking at their competency in that particular skill or endeavor. But in this example, this assessment is really geared towards social attributes. And this is K through 2, and then here's an example of a middle school that gets a little bit more, again, sophisticated. So those are some examples, again, that's certainly not exhaustive, but those are some examples of assessments, standards 1 through 4, that are included in this new edition. And I think now, Dr. James, you want me to just leave the slide up and I'll forward as you.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, you can leave it up. So I'm going to talk about the assessments for Standard 5 and Standard 6. But before I do, I just wanted to share with everybody the idea behind the assessments and student assessment. Why do we do assessment? I mean, what's one of the main reasons? We talked about, that you could use it as diagnostic. It's a way that we can measure learning. But one of the big things is it's a way we hold students accountable. And this document, when we think about using it throughout New York State, some of the power of this document is that we as a state and as physical educators and practitioners in the state can use these assessments to hold students accountable for learning, and we're able to communicate with each other about the value of these assessments, not only professionally, but with parents and students. And there's this really wise researcher, his name was Walter Doyle. And he said, without accountability, there's no task. So if you think about that, if assessments are a way of holding students accountable, if we never do any assessments, we're not holding students accountable. And without the assessment and without the accountability, there's no task. Because if you think about it, everything goes, right? If I was your English teacher and I said that you had to write an English paper, and here's the rubric, and here's how you're supposed to write it, and you have these criteria, you're going to get a grade on that rubric. I'm going to hold you accountable for that English paper, and that's called the performance grade exchange. So in physical education, if we never do assessment, we never hold people accountable, there's basically no task. But if we never hold them accountable using assessment in exchange of a grade, then students think that, our subject doesn't really matter, or it's not as important. So I just wanted to, share that thought with you and the importance of assessment in terms of holding students accountable. And then the other piece to really think about with assessment is the concept of instructional alignment. And I don't know how familiar you are with that. But instructional alignment is when your assessments align with your objectives and your learning activities. And research has shown that learning increases 3 to 5 times when you instructionally align lessons and units. And so if you never do assessment, you're not ever going to have instructional alignment, which is going to really lead to a lack of learning and very little in terms of your students valuing what you're teaching. So I just wanted to kind of share those two thoughts about accountability and instructional alignment, and really stress the importance of assessment and using assessment as part of teaching. And I always think about this saying is always in my head: teach and assess for learning. We don't just teach for learning, we have to teach and assess for learning. So I will move forward and talk a little bit more about Standard 5 assessments. So Standard 5 has to do with valuing physical activity and valuing it for the fact that it helps us with wellness, we enjoy it, challenging our self-expression. So go ahead, Dr. Seymour, move me forward.
One thing I wanted to add to Dr. James as well is, and I think you capture it nicely, the idea that the assessments and successes and failures in physical education, tying back to that physical literacy, without assessment and without learning where we stand, we cannot grow. And that includes failure, but in a safe learning environment. Well done.
So this first assessment is a K through 2 assessment. And you can see the task. Basically, the teacher asks students to identify specific health benefits from participation in daily physical activity. and they're going to identify their personal reasons for enjoyment in the activity. And the big thing is there's flexibility, because K through 2, they're not going to write complete sentences. So they could draw pictures, or they can use words or just complete any kind of assignment. It could be matching, it could be anything like that, as long as it's developmentally appropriate. Remember, developmental appropriate, it needs to be developmentally appropriate and match their ability. And so you can see that it's a 3-level rubric, and the criteria is just that they have to identify their health benefits and identify reasons for enjoyment. And again, this assessment aligns with the standard. Go ahead, Clancy. And here's a 6 through 8 assessment, and it's more sophisticated. And so in this one, the student would have to describe and link multiple specific health benefits and reasons to participate in physical activity. And again, they have a lot of different products that they could use. They could write a friendly letter to somebody, or they can make a poster, a brochure, a flyer, or other electronic product. And this assessment would be something that would have to be, in my mind, done outside of class. It could be something that they submit electronically to you as a teacher. And I think that the fact that there's a lot of flexibility in the types of products that the students could create make it a very valuable assessment. All right, you want to move to the next one, Clancy? This is a level 1. We split up 9 through 10 and 11 through 12. Level 1 assessments are for 9th through 10th graders, and level 2 would be 11th through 12th graders. And again, this gets to be even more sophisticated. And you can see this definitely isn't same stuff, different year, because we're expecting more and have higher expectations as students are older. So in this one, they would develop a marketing campaign for physical activity that links all the components of fitness, exercise, and effects on brain function, health benefits, and emotional health for his or her favorite activity. And so the marketing campaign should identify 2 reasons from the following categories. Why is it enjoyable, social, challenging, and opportunities for self-expression? And again, there's a lot of different products that they could create. It could be a letter, a poster, a video, a commercial, a PSA, a skit, or any other acceptable method to communicate the importance, the benefits, and the factors that lead to the enjoyment of the activity. And again, these are things that I would have them do outside of physical education. And because we definitely wouldn't have the time for them to do it during a physical education class, but outside of physical education and use technology, I think would be a really great way to do this. Next one, Dr. Seymour. So the last standard is standard 6. And as Dr. Seymour said, this captures what used to be our standard 3. So this standard, they want to recognize career opportunities and manage personal and community resources related to physical activity and fitness to achieve and maintain overall wellness. So we'll look at a couple assessments for standard 6. Go ahead. So this is a 3 through 5 assessment. And again, the students are going to identify community resources that are available in their community for physical activity and fitness that allow them to engage in the dimensions of wellness. So again, physical, intellectual, emotional, social. And again, we give them lots of opportunities, different types of products, writing a friendly letter, making a poster or flyer to share what community resources they have that address the dimensions of wellness. And then the rubrics attached to that. So next one. And again, this is a level 1. And again, this is would be 9th through 10th grade. They would identify available community resources that are available to engage in physical activity and fitness that address dimensions of wellness, and create a physical activity wellness plan utilizing 2 or more community resources. So the idea behind this is to actually use community resources and create a plan, a physical activity plan, how they would use those resources and and actually develop a plan to use the resource, but also to become physically active to reach their physical activity and wellness goals. And again, the rubric's there for you to assess their product. Do we have another one, Clancy? No, we have a check for understanding number 2.
Okay, so I'm gonna hit stop share. Thanks, Dr. James, and I'm gonna send you our last survey of the day. And this is going to really, again, cover the material that we just went over, particularly the assessment side of things. And hopefully this works. So take a look. I just sent it via the chat, and titled Check for Understanding 2. Another way, again, talking about the question of formative versus summative assessment. I'm hoping you understand that this is an example of a summative assessment. Anyone? Formative, because we're checking along the journey, right? We're checking along the journey within. Okay, got one response, so good. It seems as though it's working. That's great. Good, we're up to 5 responses. Well done. We're up to 20 responses. Thank you. Keep going. Couple more. This one's the longest of the 3 surveys. And you can certainly reference supplemental documents to help you, like the standards 2020 or even your old CNA document to some degree. We're up to 30 responses. So a few more. Let's get up to 60%. That would be great. Okay, we're nearing 40. Excellent, just cracked 40. Couple more minutes.
Clancy, just take note of the chat too while you're waiting.
Yeah. Great question from Dr. Madden. So we're nearing 50. I'll do one more minute and then we'll take a look. Again, the longest of the 3 surveys for sure. Appreciate your patience. Yes, I am. Okay, so I'm going to share our results, Dr. James.
Okay.
Take a look. Can everybody see my screen here? This should be the survey responses. So question one, times when you, so this is a perfect example of what to do with information and data, right? So question one, it looks to me like question one may be a little bit confusing in how it's worded. How are assessments organized? That should say, how are assessments organized using grade level bands in the second edition? Maybe that would have been a little bit better because you can see a range of answers, but the correct answers are those that indicated K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. That's the correct answer. But again, sometimes it's not the students that are flawed. It could be the teachers that are leading. So this might be an example of the question might not have been as clear as we were intending. So, but yeah, that's the answer to the question is a K through 2, the 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12 bands. And the assessments are, again, set up in that fashion. By standard, though, still remains the same. So here's question one in regards to the assessments by standard. What is the focus of standard one? And we can see that nearly 93% got the right answer. Yes, the psychomotor domain, particularly in motor skills and movement patterns. Question two, well done. And then question two, or excuse me, the next question, which really again focuses on standard two, asks, you know, what are the main themes related to assessments under standard two? And you can see that tactics and strategies was the prevailing answer. And that's right, that aligns to the standard. So back to what Dr. James mentioned, you need to have assessments that align to objectives and standards in order for the learning to take place at an optimal level. So that's fantastic. Well done, 72%. And that's the right answer. Now, standard three, we can see here, health-related fitness, 71% of the answers. And again, that's pretty good. That's really well done. Excellent. And then understanding that means a couple of different things potentially. It means written assessments and perhaps physical activity and fitness assessments to consider as well. And then standard four is again the affective domain, and we can see that 83% got that one right. Well done. Personal and social behavior. And then standard five, as Dr. James explained thoroughly, ties into that value. Yeah, the value of physical activity, and well over 75% got that one correct. Well done. And then last but not least, our +1, our standard six, and that again, nearly 80% of our attendees today understand that connection to the informed consumerism piece and assessments that obviously align accordingly. So well done. If you're, I mean, a preponderance of our respondents are getting that, and that's important to understand. If you are able to make these connections already, then when the new edition comes out in the early spring, fingers crossed, you're going to be in great shape to be able to discern and be able to utilize the document moving forward. So, Dr. James, do we want to entertain Dr. Madden's question, or do we want to continue and hit that at the end? What do we want? Dr. Madden's question was geared towards school district utilization of the CNA document. So I can certainly speak to that a little bit, and if you want to as well.
Okay, go ahead, Clancy.
So Dr. Madden asks again from the chat. I'm going to hit stop share and then go to the chat again. Another joke by Dr. Madden as well. But examples of how the document has been implemented in districts in the past. So, I mean, both Dr. James and I have been visiting school districts around the state who are looking to revise, upgrade, update their curricula accordingly, and have used the CNA document, particularly from the curricular side of things, to help augment or perhaps supplement their current curricular practices. And then aligning New York State and SHAPE National is so great. Yeah, I do like the connection of New York State and SHAPE. I think that was an important gap in the past, and I think that the gap has certainly been closed, if not narrowed, for sure. Anything you wanted to add to that, Alisa?
I just think that districts have gotten really creative using it. A lot of districts have actually gone in and really copied and pasted focal points right into their curriculum documents and have been able to build a curriculum where if somebody went from high school and they ended up teaching elementary, that they would be able to actually take what they've done with the elementary curriculum based on these focal points. And I'm not going to say seamlessly go from high school to elementary, but they've been able to do it more efficiently than if they didn't do this with their curriculum. So a lot of districts have given me that kind of feedback, and it's helped when people have moved from level to level, and particularly if they've taught at one level for a long time and not been as familiar with the content of the other level districts that have used this document. It's really helped those teachers who have made those transitions to different levels.
And if I could add to that, Dr. James reminds me another key accomplishment from the CNA document, Dr. Madden, is that I think in many cases, our fantastic PE practitioners have been doing a lot of these things for a long time. And the focal points articulate outcomes in PE in a unique way that we haven't perhaps thought of before, but yet realize that we do. And now school districts and PE practitioners can look at those focal points and say, oh, I have been doing this, but then expand on their curricular decisions as a result. So I think it's been very helpful to articulating and again, steer away from that, as you mentioned, Dr. Madden, the B for the, as Dr. James mentioned, the SSDY, same stuff, different year, and really allows us to diversify a meaningful curriculum K through 12 and PE. It uses the national standards and now the New York State standards as its grounding and focal point. Okay, so let's go back to the slideshow here. I'm going to share my screen, and Dr. James, I think you're on deck here.
All right, so we just want to show you the lesson plan template that goes with the document. Go ahead to the next slide, Clancy.
Sure. There we go.
So this is a lesson plan template that we put with the document. It's similar to the one that we had in the first edition, but it's different in the sense that all 6 standards are represented. We still have the SHAPE standards, and then we have places where you can add the vocabulary, where you can make connections, where you want students to speak and listen, talk to each other, which is discourse on the EdTPA, writing and reading and those types of things. You can put it into the lesson plan form. Clancy, you want to go to the next?
Sure.
Next
and
slide?
you heard Dr. James talk about it. I have many of my students here today. Dr. Madden's well-versed in NTPA, but this is that piece of that academic language integration in PE that we are charged with supporting in physical education as a technical subject. And we've talked about that.
And so then this is the other piece of it where you have your objectives that align with your assessment tools. And then you just put your whole lesson sequence into the box and then draw your organization and then how you're going to close the lesson out. There's a piece for universal design regarding how you're going to universally design your lessons so that all students can be successful. And then there's a teacher goal for the lesson, something you want to really focus on specifically in the lesson for you as the teacher, not the students. You want to go to the next one, Clancy?
Sure.
So we're getting close to the end. Availability of this document, we're hoping it will be available in the spring, and it will be available on the New York State AHPERD website, or you would be able to purchase a hard copy if you would like to do so. It is a member service, so if you're a member of New York State AHPERD, you have access to it for free as part of your membership. Clancy, you want to go to the next one?
Yep.
And so this has brought us to the end. But before we take questions, Clancy, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think you've captured it quite well. The purpose of this document obviously is to supplement best practices and curriculum and assessment for New York State PE practitioners. And this is going to be a membership service for our New York State AHPERD professionals.
Okay, so we can
I'll hit
take
stop
questions.
share and
Yep,
we
there you
can
go.
perhaps entertain some questions.
You can type questions in the chat if you want, or here we
Or,
go.
yeah, feel free to press your space bar or
Okay, so Dr.
Yep.
Manson just put into the chat about the virtual conference tomorrow.
Yep. And speaking of universal design, I believe Dr. Lieberman, a phenomenal professional around the world and well-versed in adapted PE services and universal design, will be presenting. She comes from the College of Brockport. She'll be presenting tomorrow on universal design, which I think I've certainly stressed to my students would be a great session to attend. There are wonderful, many fantastic professionals that are presenting in the next 3 days. And Dr. Manson, I think, is going to make sure that everybody gets their CTLE forms for today. I know my students have to attend 4 sessions over the course of the next 3 days, and they've already got one now underway for many of you.
So any questions, comments, ugly remarks, anything? We're here to take
I think we
questions.
have a question here. Are there plans to provide resources to re-educate current teachers in the new CNA? Will that be a district by district responsibility? So that comes from my students. Brett asked a question about, the new CNA and how will it get to the local school municipality level. And that's exactly right, Brett. You kind of answered your own question. School districts will certainly have to undertake the endeavor to take part in PD around that. The great news is, Brett, that over the last 2 years, I think I've ventured into almost 20 CNA document trainings around the state. And that's not singular to one district. In many cases, it's been a shared district initiative where many districts bring myself in, or Dr. James, or others like Dr. Treadwell in to show them and perhaps practice with the CNA document. And we expect now with a new edition for that to continue. What advice would we give to new teachers induction years on using the CNA document? That's a great question. I hate to be the one that monopolizes the airwaves. So Dr. James, do you have an answer? Do you want to think about that? And I can answer because I have an answer right away.
Okay, you give your answer and then I'll give mine.
Well, I think great question from Dr. Madden. New teachers, particularly in New York State, hopefully PEAT programs are utilizing the CNA document and getting firsthand experience with their teacher candidates with the document. And then as well, using it in field experiences and student teaching. That would be the first thing that I would recommend for sure.
I think it's really important. It's a resource, and we have lots of resources available to us as educators. And I think one of the things that makes somebody a whiz-bang teacher is that they're not afraid to use resources and to be able to understand good resources. And this resource aligns with the standards. It gives you outcomes. It actually almost writes you can take a focal point and write your objective from the focal point. It can be that simple. So I think that my biggest advice is to know how to use this document and use it as a whiz bang all of you, that's your goal. That is very true, Dr. Madden.
Yes.
But use it as a resource and help it build your repertoire and your skill set as a teacher. And I always think about, as a teacher, and when I teach my students, I talk about, okay, we have this tool belt. We're like superhero teachers, and you just got to know what tool to pull out of your tool belt and when to use it. And I think that having an understanding of this document and how it works is a really good tool for you to have that will really help you be a really skillful teacher that makes an impact on student learning.
Dr. James, that's well said. If I could just add to that quickly, one point I didn't think of is, as a member of New York State AHPERD, which I challenge all of you, it's your duty to support the profession that adequately supports all of us. It's your duty to be part of the professional association. So it's a membership benefit. You kill two birds with one stone. But I think Dr. James' comments are very measured and thoughtful. There's no such thing as a perfect resource. This is a wonderful resource, very thorough, but understanding that with great power comes great responsibility. Dr. Madden, I'm sure you can quote that one for me. With great power comes great responsibility. And as a PE practitioner, understanding the bevy of wonderful resources that are available, and in this example, the CNA document, and then using it to your advantage and understanding that it certainly doesn't capture the market or cover everything. I'm sure there's things that we can continue to improve and get better at, but understanding that it's your job as a PE practitioner to take the fantastic resources, our national standards from Dr. McDonald with our LOs and content strands, and through that has led and prompted our revision of our New York State standards. And then the work by Dr. James in 2015 and onwards with the CNA document are wonderful resources. And it's your job as a PE practitioner to be well-versed in all, to use to your advantage as part of your tool belt, as Dr. James mentioned. Yeah.
Are there any other questions out there? Or not seeing too much in the chat.
Good point by Dr. Madden. You know, all kidding aside, the evil doppelganger, he's a wonderful resource as well, and he's making some excellent points. I challenge, again, all of you future professionals to take heed, for sure.
Colby, I just want to say one thing to everybody, just as a point of reference. So if you look in the chat, I put in the link to all of the presenters that are going to be doing the virtual conference for New York State AHPERD starting tomorrow evening. Nothing starts before 4 o'clock, so it doesn't take up during the day hours. You can still register for the conference, but you can't register online anymore. So if you also notice in the chat, I put the phone number in. So if you're interested in attending the conference, you can still join. It's $35 for New York State AHPERD members, and it's $70 if you're not a member, but that also gives you membership. So you kill two birds with one stone right there. At least you get membership for that. So if you call that number in the morning before the conference starts at 4 o'clock, you can get in on this and take a look through the link I sent with the presenters. There's a really great lineup with some great National Teachers of the Year and so forth. So I just wanted to let you all know that. And the last thing I'll tell you, and then I'll give it back to Kobe, is right now I am putting a link up. And if you click on that link, it'll bring you to a certificate of attendance for tonight. I know a lot of people had emailed me and asked you and asked for those of you that attended some of the previous ones. And that will, give anybody who wants it, can have it. You can print it out, you can save it, put your name on it. But there's your certificate of attendance. I know a lot of you professors are asking for that. And I got a question from Brett. Will the links to the individual sessions be available on that page tomorrow? And the answer is yes. Okay, thank you, Kobe.
Been sent, the links to the sessions have been sent via email too, so you should have already received that.
If they were a member.
Awesome. Thank you for touching on that. So if anyone has another question, feel free to jump on in. But I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. James and Dr. Seymour for coming out and talking tonight. I know it's a lot to take in, but it's a lot of really great knowledge and things that we need to use and be able to utilize going forward into our profession. So a round of applause for them.
Thank you.
Kobe, one
Thank
more
you.
thing, I'm sorry. All of our future professional workshops have been recorded and they are on the YouTube link for New York State AHPERD. So if you want to go back and re-listen to something, if you're looking at it, or if you missed the first two, you can go back and listen to them there as well. And we have 3 more coming up that you'll, Kobe, maybe you could mention that about that. But we have 3 more coming up, leading us till February, the last one. And then we hopefully will have our live conference at the Turning Stone in March. All right, I'm done. Go ahead, Kobe.
Oh, you're good. So we will not be doing any sort of webinar in December, just with most of our members going back home and kind of taking time off. We will be having, let me see what the date is. January 13th is, oh no, my bad. We do have one in December.
Mhm.
It is December 15th, which is a Tuesday, again, 7 to 8:30. And then the next one will be January 13th, 7 to 8:30 again. So we will also send out an email, so be on the lookout for that. That will be coming here shortly. Again, there will be a newsletter for November that will have the Future Professionals President-elect application link to it. So definitely keep an eye out for that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to stay on this Zoom call for a little bit afterwards. So if you want to stick around and ask myself or Dr. Manson, anybody, any specific questions, feel free. Again, thank you two so much for joining us. And if you two want to stick around for a few minutes, please do. And if anyone has a specific question, again, please feel free to stay on for a few and we can talk it out. But other than that, thank you everybody so much for jumping on and have a great holiday season.